Welcome to the Reporter Podcast with Beau Berman.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Reporter after the holiday break here. It's the podcast that delves into the minds and lives of broadcast news reporters and anchors, delivering a behind-the-scenes look at their careers, methods, best practices, and personal stories from the trenches of journalism. And today we have a very exciting guest, Stephen Fabian of Inside Edition, who also happens to be from my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Stephen, thank you so much for making the time to come on to Reporter today.
Thanks, Beau. Thanks for having me. Love connecting with another person from Pittsburgh. I think people from Pittsburgh are instant best friends. I say that all the time. I live here in New York, and man, just last night I saw a guy. I was out in the East Village, and I saw a guy wearing a Steelers hoodie or something, and I just passed him in the street, and we high-fived and kept going. It's just like Pittsburgh people are so happy to meet each other, so it's nice.
Yes, it's so true. And there's it always feels like there's 1 or maybe 2 degrees of separation between people in Pittsburgh. Everyone somehow, I'm sure if we looked into it, we probably have 35 friends in common, who we just don't realize that we have.
I have a huge family in Pittsburgh. I have 26 first cousins. And so, because my dad has 10 brothers and sisters. So, I feel like everybody in Pittsburgh knows at least one of my uncles, aunts, or cousins. It's it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's really like that. So a lot of pride for Pittsburghers, but for everyone else listening who's not from Pittsburgh, we'll move on to the more reporter podcast style of conversation. So you are a national correspondent for Inside Edition. Is that correct?
Correct. Inside Edition, which has been on now for 30 years, which is crazy to think about. I think 31. I think the show launched in 89. And it has taken on many forms over the decades. I think in the beginning, in the late 80s, early 90s, the show was doing sort of 60-minute style pieces, 8-minute, 9-minute stories, maybe 3 per episode. And I think it shows sort of the strengths of the show that they knew when to adapt and when to kind of change formats. Because if you look at the show now, it's, a long piece on our show now is 3 minutes, so it really is fast paced. We whip around, we cover everything under the sun, in sort of this Inside Edition-y style, which you may ask, well, what the heck is that? It's challenging at times because you kind of have to cover the big news, cover the big stories, but find a way to do them a little bit differently, find a side door into the story, or find a different tangential sort of way to cover, for example, the impeachment hearings. I was there in D.C. When those were ongoing, I'm trying to think of when I was even there, 2 weeks ago, for the first, 4 or 5 days. And we can't report what CBS and NBC and ABC is reporting in the news of the day, the who, what, when, why, where, because viewers will have already seen that on, say, the CBS Evening News, and we come on right after the CBS Evening News. So it presents a challenge for us because you need to kind of find a different way to cover those impeachment hearings. So we did a whole story about this infamous candy drawer that exists inside the hearing room that all the senators kind of crowd around. And we found, and we actually got some great interviews for it. We ran into Alyssa Milano, who was there, and she witnessed the senators. She was in the room witnessing them eating the candy. And so it was it was an interesting thing to know, that these guys are in there deciding the fate of our country while eating, Hershey's with almonds or whatever, or M&Ms or whatever else. But it's also funny that it's been there for so many years. It's part of that room. All the senators know about it. We interviewed Chip Reed, who's been working on Capitol Hill for CBS for 2 decades. And he said, this candy drawer story goes back and yada, yada, yada. And it's the senator from Pennsylvania's desk now, and he gets all the stuff from Hershey because he's the senator from Pennsylvania. So you kind of learn something. But at times it can be challenging because you're thinking to yourself, wow, we got to find a different way to cover this. We have to find sort of the Inside Edition angle on a story.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and that does sound tough, especially, like you said, the fact that if you really don't execute that properly, the entire nation who's watching, the network is going to know, because they would see, the same information 2 times in a row. So,
right.
Or,
right.
in the same evening. So it's not like it's going to fly under the radar. I mean, most people are going to see that and think, well, I just saw this,
Yeah, exactly. We can't sort of repeat the same story. And it's nice that we're on right after the evening news in many markets. Like, I know here in New York, we're on at 7:00 on the CBS affiliate there. Here in Pittsburgh, I think we're on the ABC affiliate right after the news, right after World News Tonight. So, like, those are great time slots, and Inside Edition has held those time slots for so many years, and we still get really great ratings. I think something like 4 million people tune into the show every day, which is awesome. But you can't repeat the story, and I think our viewers look to us for that sort of side story, that sort of behind the scenes, what's really going on. Here's something else that's interesting. Here's a secret we found about this. That's what they look to our show for, and it's fun, but sometimes it's challenging.
Yeah. So who do you view as, if you work for CBS News, like someone who does work for CBS News might, sort of view their main competitor as a correspondent for ABC News or NBC News, as someone who is a correspondent for Inside Edition, who is like your arch rival, so to speak, or who's the direct rival? Who are you competing against, would you say?
It's funny that you think about it. There used to be so many of these they're called news magazine shows. When you think back, there was Hard Copy, there was A Current Affair, there was something called Inside Edition produced it too. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name. Some other sort of crime-based sort of story, and those all died. Inside Edition's like the last standing news magazine show of its kind, because we don't necessarily, some people who aren't familiar with the show will say to me, oh, so you do a lot of celebrity stuff. You guys do like the Hollywood scene. And I'm like, no, that's really not what Inside Edition is at all. I don't interview celebrities. That's just not my thing. That's Entertainment Tonight. That's E! That's Access Hollywood. That's sort of their thing. And they are all competitors with each other for sure. Inside Edition is sort of the only remaining news magazine where we do cover what's happening in Hollywood, but that's not our main beat. We also do, news, and we're covering this coronavirus, and we're covering the impeachment, and we're covering murder mystery. So it's weird that we're like kind of competing with everybody. Like sometimes Dateline or Dr. Phil will get the big interview that we're looking for, or sometimes we're competing with ABC News and Good Morning America and the Today Show over big interviews of people who are in the news for whatever reason. So sometimes it's the network, sometimes it's other shows, like I mentioned Dr. Phil. Sometimes it's even locals, depending on the markets. If it's like a story that's breaking, say in Connecticut, we were just covering the unfortunate story of Jennifer Dulos. You may be familiar with it. She has been missing now for a year. She's presumed dead. Her husband was wanted for murder. He just committed suicide. And the locals have been covering that story out there, the local news people. Every day they know all the ins and outs, and oftentimes we'll just have to sort of fly in, helicopter in, do a stand-up, do a couple of interviews, and get out of there and try to get that on the air for that day's show. But they're the ones who know all the people sometimes. So sometimes we're competing with local markets depending on the story. So it's really the show. It's not necessarily an easy show to pump out every day. We have incredibly early deadlines. 3 p.m. is our feed time every day that we have to hit. And so like my friends ask me all the time, they go, so what are you doing tomorrow? What story are you covering tomorrow? I go, dude, I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know until like 3 seconds before. I can't tell you how many times, and this blows people's minds, I can't tell you how many times somebody will come to my desk, say if I'm working in the office, and say, oh, hey, your live shot's up in 3 minutes. And I'll say, wait, what? What live shot? And they'll be like, oh, the interview with the family who has the missing children from the cruise ship, and they can't find them. And then we finally booked the dad, and he's ready, and it's in 3 minutes. And I'm like, wait, I don't even know anything about this story. And so I quickly have to, learn the facts, find out what questions I need to ask, work with the producer. It is like an incredible crash every day to make that show happen. And it's just like, it's all hands on deck. Everybody there is working to pump out that show and get that day's show done. But oftentimes, like planning for, I'm sorry, there's a big siren out my window here. I'll move away from the window. Oftentimes, there is a bit of a lag in planning for, say, the next day. Like I'm sitting here thinking, oh, the Iowa caucus is tomorrow. Are we going to go? Like, somebody going to send me? Am I going to get a call here in an hour thinking like, you better get to Iowa tomorrow? So sometimes the planning for the future kind of thing is tricky for the show because we're all hands on deck getting that day's show off the ground. So it's really it's like a beehive in that newsroom every day, and especially between the hours of 1 and 3 when all the pieces are being edited and crashed and I'm voicing stuff over, or if I'm in the field or on the road, I'm feeding back my material. It's high intensity for a good portion of the day. That's for sure.
Yeah, that sounds really stressful. I always, as a reporter, hated whenever I didn't have the time to prepare for an interview because it can be embarrassing. If you're like, you're just trying to, you're like a person in the dark, trying to feel your way through if you haven't prepared, and you can actually stumble your way into some embarrassing questions if you don't. You should always pretty much have a. It's like a lawyer, like at least have some notion of the answer before you even ask the question. And if you're going like, now, how many kids do you have that are missing? You can't ask that,
Yep.
Because you'll offend that father and he'll just, end the interview or something. So it's tough.
Yep. And that happens. That really happens. I forget what we were doing recently. I was doing an interview with a woman, and it was about her family history. It had something to do with when those SUVs were shot up and people died. It was very sad in Mexico. Remember, there was like crossfire. It had something to do with drug cartels. This was another one. And I remember interviewing a woman who used to live in that community down there where the people were from, right? And she had a backstory about the community, and we were learning more about just what life is like there for them. And I had asked her like halfway through the interview, and I'm like, and so what is the relationship with you and your dad now? How are things with you and your dad? She was like, well, he died in 1985. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, and that was the thing that I was so embarrassed and sorry to this woman. And I felt terrible, but that kind of happens when you get thrown into the fire like that. But then there are times where it is kind of nice because you ask sort of generic questions and you're sort of feeling your way out like you described. And oftentimes you'll get good bites because you're asking the simple questions that need to be asked to tell the story. You're not getting too complex. And sometimes simple answers, simple Q&As are what you need in a 2-minute and 30-second story. You can't get too deep. So sometimes it's a benefit too.
That's a really good point, actually. And I think there's actually some younger reporters who sometimes don't realize that or sort of overthink that. And they'll, try to come up with these super complex questions for a big interview, almost to like make themselves look impressive or just, kind of signal that they've done the research, which I get that feeling of wanting to do that. But I think you're exactly right. Like if the question is too complex, then they'll go back and try to log that tape and think, well, shit, I didn't even ask them, any of the basic questions. So even though I know the answers, we don't have them on tape saying them, so it's like,
right.
That can be a trap.
Yeah, totally. I think it's important to keep in mind that your viewer doesn't know the story as well as you do. And just because you know it well, that doesn't mean it's going to translate in your piece, in your script. I think you need to boil things down. I think it says something to keep it simple. I started in my career working for Channel 1 News, which no longer exists, but was for 20 years the sort of news show that was shown in high schools and junior highs around the country. I think 6 million kids used to watch the show every day. Anderson Cooper was on that show, Maria Menounos, Lisa Ling, all kinds of people who are on CBS News now and ABC and all kinds of other places. Great place to start my career. But it was also, it sort of ingrained in me script writing and a telling of a story because, and what am I trying to say here? Telling a story simply because our viewers were like 14-year-old kids, you know, and we had to break things down and explain things in a language that they could understand. And I think that translates to just really all news, you know, because you have to assume your viewer doesn't know anything about this story, even if they watched the show from the day before and this is a follow-up from the day before's piece. You have to just break it down and boil it down. And yeah, those long winding questions, they get cut out of our pieces because we don't have time for a 20-second question in our show. You know, our questions that we use from our reporters and correspondents are usually the short ones. So, yeah, that is good advice for sure.
Yeah. So what is life like as a, you know, national TV correspondent who's living in New York City? Meaning, like, do you get recognized on the streets, or, you know, what is that like?
You know, it's well, I think in New York specifically, people don't care so much. People in New York are so immune and used to seeing like super famous people just walking around in the street, and everybody like leaves people alone and keeps to themselves. So in New York, not so much. But in other parts of the country, yeah, for sure, people will. I don't know that they'll necessarily know, oh, you're Stephen Fabian. They might say you're Inside Edition guy, or I know you from Inside Edition, or whatever, you know. Interestingly, we have an incredible audience on YouTube. Believe it or not, our YouTube page, and you can fact check this. I wouldn't exactly quote me on it, but I know we're like in the top 100 of all YouTube channels, like in all of YouTube, like in the world. Yeah. We have an incredible audience on YouTube, and it's all kids. It's like 14 and 15 and 16-year-old kids. They love the Inside Edition stories to the point that they don't even know that it's a TV show. I was in Iowa not long ago for, the unfortunate story of Molly Tibbetts. If you remember, she was a college-aged jogger who was missing, later found dead, and it's just a tragic story. But I was at her vigil in the parking lot, and I was talking to members of the community just about Molly. And I had my Inside Edition mic flag out, you know, on my microphone. And these like kids came over to me and they're like, "Oh man, you work for Inside Edition?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they go, "The YouTube show, right?" And I said, well, I guess maybe I do. I said, "You know, it's a TV show too. It's actually on TV." And they had no clue because they only watch it on YouTube.
Wow.
I was just in DC, and this young kid, really smart kid, 14-year-old kid who was there for the impeachment hearings. His godmother brought him across the country, so they got tickets from their senator, and they came from California and Washington State, and she wanted him to sort of be there in the room and witness history. And this kid was a huge politics buff, really, really smart kid. He saw me in the hallways, and he goes, "Oh, Inside Edition." And then I ran into him later, and I said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, Where do you watch the show? Is it on YouTube?" He goes, "Yeah, it's on YouTube." I go, "Did you know it's a TV show?" He's like, "No, I had no clue." So it's funny. And, you know, so that's been happening more and more, that young kids are recognizing us because they watch on YouTube. Because really, like I always say, who's the audience for Inside Edition? It's like moms and aunts. Like I always joke to like my friends in Pittsburgh. I'm like, "Oh yeah, your mom or your aunt watches the show." And like, hands down, like for sure, your grandma. And that's totally the case. I get feedback from all my friends about, "Oh, my grandma says she watches you every day. My Aunt Sue watches you every day, blah, 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 blah." But now it's funny that also like 14, like junior high school kids are watching Inside Edition. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's hilarious. And that's such a, you know, it's such a great anecdote because it's just, you know, I think we see stuff like that more and more where you're just, it just, you know, the generational gap there and the means of consumption for media. But I want to ask you, I mean, what do you think that says about the direction of the broadcast industry? You know, the fact that the kids are consuming this through YouTube. that now YouTube has something called YouTube TV that people can subscribe to instead of cable. I just feel like we're in this weird place right now where TV, like actual TV, is still very lucrative, right? Like advertising dollars and political campaigns will still spend there. But by the same token, like the people who are going to be 30 years old 10 years from now, or in 15 years, maybe is more like it, they're not watching on TV. As you just said, they're watching on YouTube or they're fooling around on TikTok. So, from your perspective, I mean, how do we handle that? Obviously that's probably above our pay grade, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're in some sort of transitionary time right now where I think everybody's trying to figure out that question. I think, you're seeing the networks have these 24-hour streaming channels. I don't know, and that's all like web oriented. I don't know if they're being watched because they're geared for screens that are still TV screen sized. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so CBSN, for example, that's CBS News's 24-hour streaming service. It's good. I watch it while I'm at work. And they're across the street, and I know some folks over there, but it's still like a TV show. It's still, it's still a screen that looks like your flat screen TV in your living room.
Yeah.
And I just don't know, when we're all on our phones nonstop, that a 24-hour streaming thing that looks like a TV show is going to fly. I don't know that that's the future. I don't know that that's where we're headed. Now, I know there's some interesting things happening with Quibi, which has not launched yet. And I think they're going to be producing content that is just geared for your phone. And I think that's maybe where we'll start to see some of this go towards as things get ironed out about how to make a successful streaming news source. I think it needs to be geared for your phone. I think it needs to be something that you can watch while you're in the back of a cab or you're on the subway or you're at your desk, and it's on your phone, just like Instagram's on your phone, just like Twitter is on your phone. It needs to be geared for that size screen. And I think we could be headed in that direction. I mean, I don't know that the news shows, the 6:30 news shows, are going to die off. I don't think those morning shows, the Today Show and Good Morning America, I don't think those are going anywhere. I think those are safe and, like you mentioned, also lucrative. I just think that, especially as older viewers, the older generations sort of go away, and now people who are watching the news, who have had phones and social media and everything their entire lives, as they become the primary viewers, I think we'll see even more the switch to things that are geared towards the phone and towards I was going to say computer, but I don't even think computer. I think everything's going to be geared towards your phone screen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I mean, I don't know that, I'm trying to think of Inside Edition and its longevity. The show gets such good ratings now. I mean, this show is, in my mind, pretty safe. The ratings hold up. I can't see a show like ours going away anytime soon. So I don't know. It's a tough question. The next 10 years will surely be interesting, on that front, because who knows really where we're headed. And you're right. It's somebody's going to figure it out. Maybe it should be me and you. Maybe we should figure this thing out. Make the big buck.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the thing you mentioned though, what is it? Quibi? How do you spell that?
Quibi. I know they're like still sort of in their hiring phase and getting stuff launched, but I think their thing is like that they're going to be producing content in short bursts for your phone, to watch on your phone.
Have you seen
and even to watch.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, have you seen this NBC LX?
No, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Quibi concept a little bit. It's just like NBC has hired a slew of journalists to kind of produce direct to social media or direct to web content, and it's like in the nascent stages right now. But one of my friends, Noah Pransky, who was actually the guest of the first episode of this podcast, works for them now after like 20 years in local news. You know, a lot of experimental stuff out there right now.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, it's a big wild world out there on the internet, of course. So it should be interesting to see what happens here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I'm pulling up the YouTube page for Inside Edition, and first of all, you're right. I mean, 7.12 million subscribers. First of all, which is just a gigantic number. And then I'm just reading the first 5 stories, and it doesn't. Now that I look at the titles, it just like doesn't surprise me that that a lot of teenagers are into this. I mean, number one is just the first 4 hours ago was posted. 13-year-old cries as he's surprised with dog from late dad. So, I mean, it's a story literally about a teenager, and then it's, pets, something a lot of people relate to.
Right.
And then woman who falls into ice cold water is body shamed, which, I mean, bullying and that sort of thing.
Right. And what's interesting about those two that you pulled, that ice one is from Friday's show. The other one, I think, is just a web piece that our web team produced. Like, most of the content from our show, the broadcast show, then becomes a YouTube video. But then we have a whole web department that's like producing their own content and voicing over stuff and putting stories together. And those stories will go to the YouTube page and also go to the InsideEdition.com page. But just the sheer number of videos that we're putting out every day is impressive. And what's even more impressive is, this is so hard to believe, when I started at Inside Edition, which was in September of 2014, we had 2 people working in the web department. There was no YouTube page.
Wow.
There was, just to get my story on the web, I used to have to like ask and put in a request and be like, what do you mean it's not online?
Yeah.
And it's just amazing the growth that has occurred in our web division in the past 5 years, and the folks over there have done a really, really, really great job. It just used to boggle my mind. Like, we've worked on a story all day. Some story coordinator or AP at the show has spent weeks trying to book somebody. We've traveled, we've shot an interview, we've hired crews, we've edited it, we've, put time and man hours into producing this piece, and then like, it's not online and we can't promote it, and it airs once at 7 o'clock across the country, and then it's never to be seen again. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
So they got smart really quick, and man, they've done a great job, because you're right. Look at some of those view counts on those YouTube stories, and man, they're through the roof.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy that YouTube page didn't even exist in 2014. I mean, that is really amazing to me. That's just nuts. That used to drive me so crazy with even local news, where you talk about all the money and manpower and work that goes into a story, and we're going to treat it as if like, hey, if you didn't catch it at 11, then screw you. It's like, no. We need to be making it as widely available as possible. Because the other thing with the web is there's nothing to lose. If you put it up and it gets 10 views, fine. Or it could get 10 million. So there's really nothing to lose, was always
one of my favorite ones that goes, and it's funny because like certain things, like you mentioned, will blow up on the YouTube page more than others, right? If there's like news of the day, sort of breaking news kind of stuff that's going to change in like a couple hours, I don't think our web team will even put that on YouTube, because it kind of becomes obsolete almost instantly.
Right.
But like, I did a story about, it was a really interesting story about flushable wipes, like Lysol wipes or whatever that you use to clean your counters or your bathrooms or whatever, and how they say flushable, but you're really not supposed to flush them. They wreak havoc on the sewage system and water treatment plants. It's amazing the money that is spent on filtering out those wipes from like a water treatment plant. I went to this water treatment plant in Brooklyn, and it is all day, 24 hours a day, filtering out these wipes. They create these things called fatbergs that like live in the sewers and claw. It's like basically a giant ball of wipes that will clog up the sewer systems and whatever. And it's kind of icky. The story was like kind of gross, but also informational, because we kind of said, like, we talked to somebody from, say, Good Housekeeping or something, who told us, like, here are the many things that people flush down the toilet that they shouldn't be flushing down the toilet. And then we showed sort of this gross video from the water treatment plant, and I'm like raking through this big mound of flushable wipes. But that story on Inside Edition has, I don't know, on the YouTube page has like millions of views, like 14 million views or something. We could probably look it up and see.
Yeah.
But like, that's a perfect kind of story on that will blow up on the YouTube page, because it's informational, but it's also kind of gross, and the visuals are really astonishing. So
yes,
a good one.
Yeah, I just pulled it up, and it has 3.5 million views in the last 9 months.
Oh, okay. So 3.5.
That's a lot. That's a lot of views. I mean, there, by comparison, the Inside Edition story about right below it, which comes up, is hotel bathrooms may not be as clean as you wish they were. 9 million views, since 2 years ago. So it's just, all of these things are just totally, could detox foot baths actually remove toxins? 5.7 million. I mean, those are just crazy numbers, actually.
Yep.
For news content, right? Because, Justin Bieber can put a video up and it'll get 20 million in a day, but news content typically is not doing that well. So I think you're absolutely right. It's that hybrid of being news, like, infotainment kind of thing, or like news you can use type of deal.
Oh man, that's a phrase right out of my EP's vocabulary. News you can use. We love those kind of segments. We really do a lot of them, and they do well. They do well for us, for sure.
That's awesome. So let's focus on let's switch gears and talk about. I mean, frankly, I'm curious about your career and sort of your upbringing. So did you, what did you want to be when you were a kid, when you were growing up? Did you always want to be an Inside Edition reporter, or what did you aspire to be?
Well, if I'm being dead honest, when I was 14 years old, I was 100% sure I was going to be a pro wrestler. So that didn't work out when I realized I was only ever going to be like 5'9". So I had to sort of dash those dreams. But I always had a video camera and stuff, and was always sort of making movies and doing crazy stuff and editing things sort of in the camera growing up. And then when I got to high school, I went to Plum High School, and we have a really great television productions department at Plum High School. And we have been doing there for now 20 plus years a telethon for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, where we raise money and whatever else. And my year, I was one of the hosts, and we raised something like $74,000 at this telethon for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And at the time, that was a national record for, a donation from a district or whatever.
Wow.
So doing that, and that was a live show. I hosted it, and it was 5.5 hours or 6.5 hours with guests coming on, and edited together pieces that we would toss to and have all kinds of little skits and stuff. That was a challenge with a completely student crew. And we were only the second year that we were doing it there at Plum. And they've been like I said, they've been doing it every year ever since. Next year, I think they'll cross over $1 million total after all these years donated to Make-A-Wish, which is an amazing accomplishment. The kids take so much pride in it, and I go back every year as a guest. So that's sort of where I got my start, hosting little shows for Plum High School's television department, hosting that telethon. I remember I interviewed Steve Blass at the telethon, and I was excited to interview him, World Series champion, Pirates broadcaster, that kind of thing. So I had done my research and had some pretty cool questions to ask him. And when the telethon was wrapped, or his segment was wrapped, I remember turning the corner and overhearing him say to my TV teacher, Mr. Barad, who I'm still very, very close with, he said to him, Steve Blass was like, tell your interviewer, whoever he was, you did a really great job. Man, he did a good job. And I thought, maybe I could make this into something. Maybe I could do this as my career. So that's when I sort of came up with that goal that like I wanted to sort of be in broadcast TV. So then I did that in college. I had my own show. I had my own radio show. I went to Allegheny College, north of Pittsburgh there in Meadville, and, continued to learn how to edit and shoot and write and produce and all that stuff. And then I graduated college, and man, that was a scary time because I always refer to this era of my life as when I had 7 low-paying jobs. I worked in a baby clothes store. I was a bartender. I was an MC for an indoor soccer team. I hosted a web show about Philly nightlife and bars and nightlife in the Philadelphia area. I hosted another show about men's, it was like guys talking about dating and like dating struggles and stuff like that. I did another show that I would go to junkets and interview celebrities, but I was living in Philadelphia and traveling to New York, and I wasn't getting paid for this job. So I was essentially losing money because I'd have to like pay to get on the train. So I basically took anything that anybody would hire me to do just so I could develop my reel and keep that going, all the while doing these other odd jobs just to pay the rent. And I was living in Philly versus New York just because I had some family there, and it was easier to be there and be close to New York without having to like pay New York prices. But then the big get was Channel One News when they came calling. And believe it or not, this story I tell all the time, I always wanted to work for Channel One because it's such a great place for somebody in their early 20s. You get such great exposure. You get to travel the world, really. I mean, I went to Germany for Channel One. I went to the Dominican Republic. I went to Mexico a bunch of times, covered the drug war. I did so many just in-depth, long, like 10-minute pieces for Channel One at age 24, 25, which was amazing. How I got that job, I emailed info@channel1.com. It was like a generic email address. I didn't know if they were hiring. I didn't know if they were looking for anybody. I just gave it a shot. I used to do this kind of stuff all the time. And, put my resume, put a link to my demo reel, some photos, whatever else, and thinking, what do I have to lose? And then I don't remember, a couple weeks later, I got a call from somebody at NBC News because Channel One was being produced out of 30 Rock. It was like an arm of NBC News for a short amount of time. And I got a call from somebody from within 30 Rock. And they're like, can you be here next week? You need to interview with like 9 different people. You're going to come in and take an editing test. You're going to take a current events quiz. We're going to shoot something with you on camera. And I was like 5 days later or 7 days later, I was interviewing with the head of talent at NBC News and all these other sort of bigwigs at NBC. It was really overwhelming.
Wow.
And then on top of that, I thought it went sort of well. I don't know that I crushed the current events quiz. Because I wasn't necessarily like doing news. I was doing television, but I wasn't necessarily like in the news world in that era of my life. So I didn't have like all the confidence in the world coming out of the interview, but I thought like, okay, I think they liked me. I think they're maybe unsure. I followed up with everybody. And then 3 days later, I got a response that said, we liked you, but we want to make sure you can do the job. So can you produce for us 2 pieces in the style of Channel One News, any topic you pick, and, with a week's deadline or something. I didn't have any gear. I didn't have a camera. I had to borrow all this stuff, sort of put my life on hold, all these other odd jobs and stuff I was doing. I just had to press pause and produced these pieces and uploaded them to YouTube and sent them in and thought, okay, well, I've done the best possible job I could do. I tried as hard as I could, and if I don't get it, I don't get it. But if I do, then awesome. And then I was working in the baby clothes store a couple days later, maybe a week or so later, when I got the call and they offered me the job. And I was just like ecstatic, as you can imagine, because I had been really grinding those past, it was like 2.5, 3 years where I was really trying to get something full time and doing all these crazy jobs and being able to like focus in on one thing at that point. That was a huge moment. I really felt like, okay, I've done it now. Now I'm in. So that was sort of how it all began.
Yeah, that's awesome. Every time you say baby clothes store, I just crack up. I don't know why. It's just such a funny early job for.
It was a cool store. So friends of mine opened, a husband and wife. They opened this store in Philadelphia that sold really high end baby clothes and strollers and rockers and
Oh, okay.
it was like really cool stuff. Like this
Yeah.
one brand we used to sell would take like old school concert tees, like Rolling Stones tees from like the 70s, and cut them down and make like baby shirts out of them and sell them for like $100, and people were coming in there and buying them. It was nuts. But it was fun to work there. It was cool.
Nice. Yeah, that makes more sense. So what year would that have been when you secured the job at Channel One News? Approximately.
That was 2008.
Okay.
2008. I was there for 3 years, 3 seasons, and then I went to Arizona and worked for a show called Right This Minute that is still on. It's another nationally syndicated show, and I helped launch that show. I was on episode 1 of that show, which was a very interesting process. And that show's doing well too. It's a successful show. It's a show about viral videos, sort of before they go viral, where the hosts sit around a table, and one of the hosts per segment will like have all the details on this particular video, whether that is a sports video, a gross out video, a action adventure video, a funny video, a prank video, a news video, like literally anything. We'll have all the details on that particular video, show it to the other hosts for the first time. They're seeing it all for the first time, and then sort of have this candid conversation where you're asking questions and just commenting and reacting to the video. So like the viewer is seeing the video for the first time, but also the hosts are seeing the video for the first time. And then you kind of edit it down into this minute 30 little piece of sort of organic reaction to this video, and also information about those particular videos. And truly, that show was so impressive because our whole team was dedicated to finding these videos before they go viral. And they'd be on our show, and then 2 days later they'd be on the Today Show and Good Morning America and all the other morning shows, because that was like what we did. We had the ways, we had the systems down to find these videos first. And it was always impressive, like, to see what would happen to these videos after they'd be on our show, where else they would land. And it was always the networks and other places. So I was on that show for 3 years as well, and lived in Arizona, which was interesting. It was a fun time being out there, and then came back to New York for Inside Edition in 2014.
Nice. Awesome. And so let me ask you this. A lot of kids coming out of college, myself included, take the route of like local news. You know, they think of they look for a local news station that's hiring somewhere across the country, and sometimes they relocate there. You know, and sometimes they have to take a job as a waiter at a restaurant first and search, and, you know, or take odd jobs, you know, whatever they may be. And then eventually they get a job in local news, and you kind of took a different path. And so can you just talk about that a little bit of, you know, did you ever consider that local news route, or, you know, what led you to kind of hang on to those odd jobs and push for something more like national, or, you know, I guess Channel One is sort of in a league of its own, but, you know, how did that come about?
Yeah, you know, I didn't really necessarily pursue local news stuff. I never saw it as like my dream, or I never really wanted to do it, right? There was a time that I was trying to get a job in Erie doing sports for one of the local stations up there, and it didn't work out. And I just but I wasn't sure that I wanted it anyway. And I don't know, I just kind of felt lukewarm about the whole thing. I didn't see myself doing that. And I think I just always kind of wanted to stay true to myself and be myself on the air, as opposed to being, here's a local news guy being a local news guy. Do you know what I mean? And that's not to, I mean, local news people are amazing, and they do the hardest work. And that's not to diminish what local news people do. I just didn't see myself doing that, you know, so I never sort of steered myself in that direction. Now, look, when I was 23, 24 and doing all those odd jobs and whatever else, if some local news station came calling and was like, we have a job for you, I probably would have taken that job. It just wasn't something that I was like going after. I wasn't seeking it out, and it sort of, I actually never even went into TV thinking I was going to do news. That wasn't necessarily my main function or goal in the beginning. I was doing kind of hosting stuff and, lighter things and whatever. But then once I got to Channel 1 and started doing that, I'm like, oh, I could do this. I could do this just the same as anybody else, but also be myself. In the role on air, I can still be me while covering these news stories for Channel 1. And that's where I sort of feel like that was like my niche, right? Like I can tell these stories in a relatable way. I can be a dude that you looks like, oh, I feel like I know that guy, or he's a guy I would like to, have a beer with, or whatever, sort of be relatable, be myself without being like, and now I'm a news person and I'm talking to you like this. And this is, that's never really been my cup of tea. So yeah, I don't know how I sort of avoided it, but I did, and here I am. So it's worked out. It's not that I would have been opposed to it. It's just not something I sought out.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very true. First of all, that you're right. That you really, there's not an opportunity to reveal your personality very much in local news unless you are a meteorologist, a weather person, or if you're the sports person. And then even then, there's only so much that you can go where you can color outside the lines. And then if you're a strictly news person, friends of mine used to ask me this a lot, kind of thing of, can you show more personality, or, that sort of thing, or, how much personality are you allowed to show? And I would say, well, look, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of what we're covering are murders. So you can't. I mean, you're not going to be like laughing, smiling, or dancing.
Right.
I mean, so it's very limited in what you can do. And you're right. You have that kind of news voice and that sort of thing. So that can be tricky. But I found it interesting, your pathway, because it seems like it ended up, hindsight's 20/20, but it ended up sort of career defining, or it put some like, sometimes the first role you take, people really will judge you in a good way or bad way based on that role. And it just seems like it benefited you that you kind of took that path. And so you didn't sort of get pegged or pigeonholed as, that's a local news guy. It was kind of this in-between area. And it just strikes me as something that may or may not have, obviously you would know better than me, but it appears as though it may have, kind of benefited you on this trajectory.
Yeah, it worked out because, like, for example, Channel 1 at that time, they weren't looking for anybody who had local news experience, because they didn't want somebody to come in with those sort of local news, tools and maybe habits. They kind of wanted somebody with like a clean slate that they could kind of mold into their style. And they liked my presence on camera from the reel and stuff that I sent them. And so I kind of pitched that about me to them. I said, look, I can do the work. You guys like me on camera. You like my look. You like whatever, like the presence or whatever. And I know how to, and part of this job working for Channel 1 was you had to shoot, edit, write, and produce your own stuff. I used to travel by myself with my gear and shoot myself, like on a tripod, set up my stand-up. It was a lot of work. And I told them, I can edit circles around a lot of my friends. I can shoot anything. I can produce. I'm not afraid to pick up the phone and call some people and set things up. And I can do all the physical work that you're asking for, but I'm also a clean slate. I don't have any bad habits. I don't have, I'm not coming from a job where I was a certain mold and it's going to be hard for me to get out of those habits and that mold. Like, I'm a clean slate, so hire me. And it's kind of worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's awesome. So what are some of the biggest stories? Like, let's just say like the first three biggest stories that you've covered that come to your mind. And I know you've done a lot, and that's probably difficult, but in your eyes,
yeah, it's a tough question, because gosh, for Inside Edition, especially, we work so hard every day, and then it's almost like the next day happens and you're like, what am I working on today? And you're like, I can't even remember what I did yesterday. What story did I have on the show yesterday? Or people would call me and say, hey, I saw that story you did about the dog rescue. I'm like, man, I don't even remember that because I'm working on something else now. But what comes to mind, the hurricane a couple years ago, I guess that was last year or it was 2018 in Florida, Hurricane Michael down there. We did a lot of work down there. That was eye-opening to see. You hear the phrase, oh, it looks like a bomb went off. It looks like a buzzsaw came through. And man, that could not be more true in some of these areas in Florida that we saw. So that was one. Seeing up close was really, really, it was heartbreaking. That I would say when I went to Juarez in 2009, which was the height of the drug war, went down there for Channel 1. It was extremely dangerous. Just scary stuff. And bringing back some of the visuals that we brought back for that story, that was important. I also covered the Olympics for Channel 1 in 2010 in Vancouver. That was wild because we were there for like the entire games. So it was like 3.5 weeks. Me and one producer, shooter, just the two of us. We were a 2-man team, and we were producing like a third of the show every day from Vancouver. We're just really working our tails off at a young age. That's something that I always remember. And then I'm trying to think of something else for Inside Edition, man. Obviously, I covered the 2016 election. I was all over the place back then at all the debates. And, that famous moment from the first GOP debate in 2016, the run-up to 2016 in Cleveland. Everybody goes back. If you've seen the movie Bombshell, the Fox News movie, did you see that one?
No, I actually haven't seen that.
They touch on that famous moment between Trump and Megyn Kelly from the debate stage.
Oh, okay.
And that was like really, if you remember that moment, it's when they sort of had a tiff on screen, and then he went off to say all the things about her, and it was just a whirlwind. I mean, I was there. I was in the arena. I was in the Wall Street Journal the next day. There was a picture of me holding my mic in Donald Trump's face after that debate. Our camera, like, we were the first people to kind of get him after that debate. And that was such a huge moment for politics, for our country. It was kind of a moment where things were never the same. Or we kind of were like, okay, it's not going to be the same going forward, I feel like. Right. And that has proven to be true throughout these past 4 years. I mean, look, the face of politics has really kind of changed. And that moment goes down in history. And then seeing it on the movie, seeing it on this movie with all these wonderful, huge named actors, Charlize Theron and whoever else, I'm like, oh man, it was crazy. Like, I was there. I was in that room that they're in right now on this movie. It was pretty wild.
Yes. Yeah. That must be, weird to see that. Yeah. And pretty huge moment, especially knowing what we know now about that moment as a shift, a real like inflection point or whatnot, big, just such a huge moment. At the time, we didn't really know what would come after that. So do you work with, do you work with a photographer? I'm assuming, like when you go out to Connecticut, say for this, Jennifer Dulos and her husband recently basically killed himself. When you go out there for that story, are you traveling in an SUV? Is it a crew of just you and a photographer, or is there also a producer and a lighting person or sound guy?
No, it's so anything that's in the New York area, and Connecticut really is the New York area, we'll take our own guys. We have, a handful of full-time photographers and sound people. We always have a sound person too. So like going up to Connecticut, it's usually just me, the cameraman, an audio person, and maybe like an AP, like an associate producer. Most of the time it's just me, and most of the time I'm not traveling with a producer. And they will also send our regular full-time crews out to like DC with me when I'm covering the impeachment, or if it's a story where we really need to make sure we're coming back with perfect video, like if it's somebody we've been working on, booking for months and whatever, we'll take our own guys because our guys are great. They know exactly what we're looking for, exactly just the style of shooting that our bosses like, and that sort of fits the Inside Edition mold. We'll take our own guys. But then there are times where they'll send me, say, to like Louisville, Kentucky for something, and we'll hire a freelance crew in those cities. So I'll sort of fly solo, travel solo, meet up with the freelance crew, and just work with them for a day or two. And that's always kind of funny because there was a guy I worked with recently. I forget where we were, in Ohio. I think I was in Columbus, Ohio. And like, I hadn't seen him for like 4 years. I was like, oh, hey, we're working together again. So it's kind of nice to have friends all around the city, or all around the country that you see every now and then. We have great crews in Florida and down south in Texas. So it's a mix. They're sort of sending our own guys more often now because I think they're realizing there is such value in the level of trust that we have with our camera guys, and knowing that like they're not going to miss something, especially if it's a breaking story and we're out in the field, like kind of reactively shooting what's happening around us. Those guys are the best. So, but it is a mixed bag. Sometimes I'm with freelance crews, sometimes I'm with my own people, but rarely am I with a producer. I mean, I'm sort of my own producer most of the time out in the field.
Yeah.
But I'll be working, how our show sort of works is then I'll be working with a producer who's back in the office, who's writing. So like for the impeach, I'm just using that since it was recent. I'm gathering material with my crew in Washington, feeding stuff back using a live view, maybe shooting a stand-up, telling them what I shot, interviewing senators, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's like somebody back in New York who's working on a larger script that all my stuff will go into. And then like they'll send me the script and we'll kind of work together on that. Because a lot of times I'm just cultivating stuff in the field and grabbing stuff in the field, and I don't necessarily know the angle or the story that we're producing in New York, and they're kind of figuring that out as I'm shooting. So I can't really sit down and stop what I'm doing and pump out a whole script because I have to be like doing the stuff. I have to be shooting the stuff and asking the questions and being on camera. So it's like a team effort.
Yeah. So sorry, I may have missed exactly. So you said someone back in New York will pretty much write the script for you based on what you've gathered and like some phone calls of your vision, or is that kind of how that works? And then you'll
yeah. It's a collaborative sort of thing, right? Like I'm not writing a full script from the field and sending it back. I might be writing a stand-up or writing this or writing that and sending it back. But there is somebody who's like pumping out the full script back in New York because they're gathering other elements there too. They're gathering moments from television, or here's what the View said about this, or here's what there was a moment from an NBC piece, because we can kind of pull all those other sources into one big piece. And then our executive producer, Charles, he sits down and reads every word of every script and makes his changes. So the producer has to then sit with him and go through the script and all of that. So I can't be there for that. The correspondents at Inside Edition, there's so few of us. There's 2 full-time correspondents in New York. There's 2 freelancers, or two part-time people in New York. And we are just pulled in so many directions. Like Friday, I think I shot 4 interviews for 4 different stories that I don't have time to sit there and write out a full script for a particular story, because I'm probably shooting 4 or 5 different things every day. So it's a team effort, how that all comes together. And it's different, whereas like in local news, I'm sure you're out there covering whatever happened, writing the script from the truck or whatever and sending it. That's probably how that works. It's much different at Inside Edition. It's definitely like a team.
When you have to record your voice for the final script, are you just doing that inside of a hallway or a car, or how are you doing that?
Very interesting. So obviously when we're in the office, it's in the booth. We have a, sound booth, whatever. Well, I used to be very bothered at Inside Edition when I first started that our correspondents would not track from the field. And I raised this concern. I was really upset about it because I'm like, what do you mean? I'm the one out here covering this story. I'm sending back interviews and stand-ups, whatever. Someone else's voice is on the story and then suddenly goes, here's Stephen Fabian in Washington, and it comes to me, and I'll do a stand-up, and then it goes back to like stuff I shot with someone else's voice on it. And you're kind of like, wait a second.
Yeah.
This is my story. So they were doing that for a long time. In the past couple of years, I helped in implementing a system for us, for the reporters to be able to track from the field. I actually use this little device called an iRig, and it connects to my iPhone. An XLR cable goes from the device to a microphone, and then it's all like, so it goes mic, cable to the iRig device to my phone. And yeah, I will be in a hallway or a small room with a jacket over my head, kind of creating a little sound booth. But what's nice about the iRig is it filters out a lot of the other background noise and stuff and creates a pretty clean audio sound, which is nice. And I'll send that back as like a file that will get put into our system in New York. And that system, this process seems to be working. So I'm happy now because now it's not someone else's voice on the story that I shot all day and I just suddenly pop up and do a stand-up. I have a little bit more ownership over it now. Which
yeah, that's a good change to implement. It's good that you pushed for that, I think, for sure. So what would you say is the single most difficult part of your job at this point?
I mean, the deadline's crazy. It really, a lot of times I don't get my story assignment until noon, or I don't necessarily know what I'm shooting until noon or seconds before, like I described earlier. Meeting that deadline is tricky for sure. It's a lot of, I always use this analogy. It's like when firefighters, and I'm not comparing what we do to firefighters, they're much braver and tougher people. But similarly, it's like sitting around a firehouse and you're waiting, and then the bell goes off and you have to fly and just book it and get this done as quick as possible. That is, that's a tricky thing. You kind of have to be ready for anything because we also cover everything under the sun, you kind of also have to have a little bit of a knowledge of what's going on, all the stories that are happening. You kind of need to just know a little bit about everything because, I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow at 9 a.m. I could be in another city. I could be face to face with, some important interview. I could be, I just don't know. So it's being prepared. It's being ready to jump when that alarm bell goes off is tough. And just, being ready. We were in DC for the impeachment, and this was a while back. I remember I woke up, I was in DC. They weren't sure if they were going to keep me. They decided, here's what we'd like you to do today. See if you can go get a moment with Congresswoman Dingell. Do you remember this story where Donald Trump said some things about Congresswoman Dingell's late husband, who was a congressman? Yeah. Right. Yep. So that was sort of the big story overnight. So they said, go see if you can maybe get an interview with her. So I said, okay. So me and my crew, we went over to the House Representatives building where her office is. We were outside her office for, I'm telling you, 40 seconds. We didn't even have our gear set up yet. And suddenly she appeared. I introduced myself. I asked if we could get a couple questions with her. Once she said, like, okay, my audio guy hands me my mic. We get like 3 questions with her. Wonderful, because that's the kind of story we wanted to do that day. So we're like, great. It was like 8 a.m. We had already shot something that's totally usable for today's show. I had shot stand-ups the night before that were sort of would live for that day's show. So I'm thinking like, we already kind of have a story in the can for today. This is nice. At 1:30, they decided, we don't like your stand-ups from last night. We want you to go gather all the major newspapers, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post, which is hard to find in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And you're going to do a stand-up with the Capitol in the background talking about the different headlines from the impeachment hearings that were ongoing or whatever. The only place you can really find the New York Post is at Union Station in D.C. So now at 1:30, we are flying around DC after we had like shot that interview in the morning and kind of didn't do much the rest of the day.
Right.
We're like, crap, we have 90 minutes to go gather these newspapers, get to Union Station, fly around, set up this shot, and do this stand-up. And I remember by the time we got to Union Station, it was like 2:30. I went inside, found the New York Post, found all the other newspapers, came out. My crew was setting up at like 2:50. We turned the live view on. I did the stand-up, set it back at 2:53 or something, 7 minutes before our deadline, and it made air. And then we got on the train and went back to New York. So it's
Wow.
like, yeah, it's hard to, you can't really plan because you just don't know what's going to happen, and you kind of just have to react to whatever maybe they're deciding in New York or whatever you end up shooting. It's a lot of work really fast for short bursts, and then maybe you sit there for a little bit, then you work again really fast. It's just it's a frenzy. It's a frenzy every day.
Don't you kind of hate those moments in some regard, but then also sort of love them, like that adrenaline rush? And it just, there were moments like that in local as well. And you just, like, whenever you're grabbing those newspapers and hopping back in the car, and I almost always felt like a spy or something, or like someone who had this like really important mission.
It is. It's a rush. It's getting it done. You're like, and then we freaking did it. And you're like, oh, we did it. It was great. And then you just move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Have you ever missed the deadline?
There's not like a real notable one that sticks out to me. I mean, there are times for Inside Edition, because we do a refeed at like 4:30 where the boss will make some changes to scripts and stuff. And there will be times where maybe something doesn't make it for the 3:00 show, and we're like, we're just not going to make it for 3, but we'll make it for 4:30. That happens from time to time, but not really. No, we usually make it. That's the crazy thing. It's like, we get these crazy assignments and we got to run around, but we always get it done. And so that's why we keep getting asked to do these crazy things and get them done quickly, because the staff there is so good at doing their job and doing it in a timely manner and getting things done quickly.
Yeah.
That, the asks keep coming.
We'll kind of work towards a close here, wrap up now. For young journalists, I always think, it's important to try to help them or provide whatever advice we can if we're, a little bit older. And, if someone's coming out of college now and went to an Allegheny college or what have you, and they would love to be on TV, but they're not kind of sure what route to take, any advice for someone who's, 21 or 22 and just coming out?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I tell this to our interns in the office all the time. I don't care really what job you want to do. If you want to be a producer, if you want to be an editor, if you want to be a camera person, if you want to be a reporter, know how to do all those things. Know how to shoot, know how to write, know how to produce, know how to edit, learn an editing system, learn Avid, learn Final Cut, because the industry is shrinking and they want people to be able to do as many jobs as possible. I would have never got that job at Channel One if I didn't know how to edit, write, shoot, produce. So even if you want to just be, I just want to be on air, I just want to be a host, I want to be a reporter. No, you need to learn all these other skills, because that makes you more marketable. That makes you easier to work with, because you know what the cameraman's looking for. You know what the editor is looking for. You know how to find a good soundbite. You know how to work with a producer. Knowing a little bit about how to do all the jobs makes your life easier. It makes the people's lives around you easier too. It makes you easier to work with. So don't pigeonhole yourself by saying, I just want to be an editor. I just want to, you got to know, even if you have no aspirations of being in front of the camera, make yourself do it just to then know what it's like. And then when you would say you're a producer and you're working with an on-air person, you can work with them easier. It's just cast a wide net, gather as many skills as you can, because they're all valuable skills. And wherever you end up, whichever specific job you end up doing, you'll still use that base knowledge of skills from those other sort of positions to help you advance and help you get your job done every day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice for sure, and very helpful. I've had the similar experience where some of those skills really can propel you to the top of the pile, with the resumes, so to speak. And it's just
Right.
can give you more confidence as well too when you're in a certain situation. So how about those two stories that you had to submit for on a tight deadline for the interview with Channel One News, way back in the day? Do those still live somewhere on YouTube?
Yep.
Could we watch those? Is there any chance that people could find
Yeah,
those?
they do still live on YouTube somewhere. They're probably like, I uploaded them and probably set them to private or whatever, but I could dig them up. Man, they're funny. One was about interactive video games and whether or not they could actually be a form of exercise for young people. Like, this was when Dance Dance Revolution was big, and the Wii had just come out, so I did a story about, like, I interviewed like a trainer and a gym teacher and talked about kids exercising, because it was also like a heat wave, and I tied it into the heat wave. When it's too hot to work out outside, here's some things you could do indoors, but are these really forms of exercise? That was interesting. And then the other piece I did, I keep bringing up the baby clothes store. My friend was a professional soccer player in Philadelphia, but it was he and his wife who were running the baby clothes store. So I did this sort of feature piece about him. He's this guy who everybody knows, diving around the soccer field in Philadelphia, playing in front of thousands of people, blah, blah, blah. But here's his day job, and here he's folding baby clothes, and it was sort of this interesting look at a guy who you'd think, like, because they weren't making tons of money playing professional indoor soccer, you'd think he's a pro athlete, he's set, but not exactly. Here he is, he's, folding baby clothes and selling strollers during the day.
Yeah.
So they worked out. They sort of liked them. I
Yeah.
mean, got me the job. So
yeah, that's awesome.
That was
I
great.
just love seeing people's like early work and then comparing it, to their current stuff. And I think like it can be inspiring.
yeah, I'll dig them up. I'll dig them up and see if I can
Yeah.
send them to you. For
Well,
sure.
we'll do like I'll post like a show notes, which are some links to things you've mentioned. So that'd be perfect. I can include them there if you just email them to me. Awesome. All right. Well,
Cool.
If people want to find you on the internet now on social media, what are your handles? And if people want to watch you on Inside Edition and they're not 14 and don't want to watch on YouTube, what time are you typically on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say check your local listings, because we do air in different times in different markets across the country. We are mostly like in that prime time 7 o'clock time slot, but there are some markets where like 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. But if you go to InsideEdition.com, there is a where to watch link, and it will tell you where in your city, where and when we air. Instagram, Twitter is at Stephen Fabian TV, and my Facebook page is also the same, Stephen Fabian TV. I am, on a constant quest to keep doing more on social media. I haven't quite cracked the code yet, but I think we're all working on that. But
Yeah.
Stephen Fabian TV is basically the same handle for everything.
Cool. All right. Well, Stephen, thanks so much for joining the podcast today. Really appreciate it. Very cool to hear your perspective from the world of Inside Edition and everything that you do there. Definitely would like to chop it up a little bit more about Pittsburgh, but don't want to make it too insular or esoteric for people who aren't from Pittsburgh. But someday we'll have to.
Yeah. We could go. That could be a whole other episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Reporter Podcast with Beau Berman. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.